Hi everyone, so I'm going to do a tag video. I was not prepared to do this tag video. I just watched a couple of the videos and thought it seemed like fun. This is the beauty brand tag. I thought I would just sit back and chat and answer the 15 questions. So I first saw Abby do this tag. I'll have her video linked down below, and the creator Tara, I will have her video linked down below as well. But it's a very interesting tag and I haven't really thought much about my answers, so let's just chat, shall we? So, question number 1. Think back to when you first started your makeup collection. Are there any brands you used then that you still use today? So I've had a couple different phases when it comes to makeup. When I was first getting into makeup, I won't necessarily say starting my collection, but when I was first getting into makeup, it was drugstore, and a lot of the brands I used were like Maybelline, CoverGirl, Wet n Wild, and this would have been early 2000s, Revlon. Maybelline and CoverGirl are still two of my favorite brands when it comes to drugstore. I think it's because I built up that sort of brand loyalty connection, if you will. When I started to get into makeup again, which was around 2011, the key thing there was when Sephora opened near me, and I used a lot of Urban Decay, Dior, and then I used also a lot of MAC, and I think I really use a lot of the same. I don't really use that much Dior, but definitely MAC is still one of my favorite brands. Question 2, follow-up, which brands have you moved on from? Revlon? I think it was just because it was a drugstore brand that my mother was more drawn to. I don't even know if my mother still uses Revlon. I have to go look through her cupboard and see what sort of her brands. She has a couple of brands that she's pretty loyal to. I think she's pretty loyal to like Maybelline from what I remember. But I haven't really moved on from any brands. There's no particular brands that I was really obsessed with for a time and then stopped using. I've changed my sort of preferences and I've gone back and forth from brands, but there's no particular brands that I've really moved on from, at least not brands that I started loving and then moved on to something else. Question 3, are there any brands you thought were so expensive that you'd never buy anything from them, but now consider at least one of their products to be holy grail? If so, which brand and which product? So, there's definitely brands that I thought were very expensive and I'd never buy from them. Most notably, probably Natasha Denona. I never ever thought that I would buy Natasha Denona stuff. Now, I won't necessarily say holy grail. I really love the Natasha Denona eyeshadow formula a lot, but I've not finished anything and repurchased it to consider it to be a holy grail. Like for me, something that gets that label, if it's something that I've repurchase the same product again and again and again. Like that's when it gets a holy grail status for me. And there's no holy grails that I thought were from brands that I thought were so expensive that I'd never buy anything from them. But I have bought things from expensive brands and then fell in love with them. Question 4 is, what is a popular brand that you've never tried and don't think you ever will? Why? This is a hard question because I feel like I've tried a lot of the popular mainstream brands, even if just in samples, because originally my thought was Jouer, which I figure is a brand I probably will never end up purchasing, but I've tried samples. So to say that I've never tried a brand isn't exactly correct. I can't really think of a popular brand that I haven't tried a single thing from. That's weird. That is really strange. I mean, there's definitely some smaller brands, some indie brands, but I'm not sure how to categorize them and like if there's a particular ranking of popularity, because even some of the most popular indie brands I feel like I've tried in one way or another. Yeah, I'm at a loss here. I can't think of a popular brand that I haven't tried at least a sample from. Question 5 is, what brand perfectly encapsulates your current makeup aesthetic? Explain. Natasha Denona. Is anybody surprised? No? I know. I'm like a broken record. All I do is talk about Natasha Denona. But aesthetically, the artistry behind the brand, definitely my thing. I really overly relate with like the eyeshadow palettes and the explanations behind them. And a lot of my favorite makeup inspirations have been used by Natasha Denona for eyeshadow palettes. My favorite color combinations have been used in eyeshadow palette color schemes. I really like the simplicity of the packaging. And it's simplistic, but it's not so minimal. It's not minimal. It's like you have simple things. So like I have a few things in front of me here. Like the gold palette, right? Like it's gold, which is my favorite eyeshadow color, which is why I bought this palette to begin with, the gold and the green. Like it's not elaborate, but it's beautiful. And I'm not saying I'm not elaborate and I'm beautiful, by the way. No, it's simplistic and not super busy. So I think aesthetically that is the easiest thing for me to say, like that's my current aesthetic, is just look at Natasha Denona's Instagram. Denona's, I said it. Look at Natasha Denona's Instagram, and that's probably the style of makeup that I'm doing. Very eye heavy in most cases, just like intensity here, right here, and nowhere else. Question 6, are there any brands you haven't wanted to try purely because you don't like their packaging? Again, I'm not going into this prepared. I'm not going into this prepared. There are certain products from brands that have made me go, no, but purely on the packaging, no. I haven't wanted to invest in more Viseart, so obviously on the no buy forever, but Viseart packaging is so boring to me. The eyeshadows are fantastic, but I can't get around how boring it is. So it was something, even when I was purchasing more expensive things, I was always overlooking because the packaging is so boring, and I haven't wanted to, look at anything else because I'm just like dull and not interesting. But there are some things some packaging that's almost excessively elaborate, and that has kept me away from, wanting to explore that, which I think. No, that's not the next question, but yeah, there's some brands that just, they go too far with some of the packaging, and I don't like things that are oversized with like oversized packaging but tiny product. That is something that always irritates me. This is weird, honestly, going into this as a person on a no-buy, because I haven't purchased a lot of new things. I haven't purchased anything in months, but also like I made like 2 sort of splurgy purchases over the last 19-20 months. So this is a very weird kind of experience. I've wanted to do more of these makeup tags, but so many of them are about like purchasing things, and I feel like I'm so out of the loop from purchasing things. Question 7 is there a brand you've only tried because their packaging lured you in? If so, were you happy with the actual product? Pat McGrath packaging, well, no, it was the shadows that got me with the Pat McGrath palette. I think a lot of the things I've looked at packaging wise, I haven't ended up purchasing because I felt like I was gonna be disappointed by it, or I just didn't want to spend that kind of money on something just for the packaging, like the Pat McGrath Star Wars collection. Like I really wanted the R2-D2 lip balm, I think it was, which I would have used, and I would have kept that packaging forever, but oh wait, speaking of lipsticks, that reminds me of the YSL lipstick, the very elaborate packaging. Yeah, YSL, the gold tubes, right? I bought one of those for the packaging and then hated it. I think there's some things like that. Like a few times I've bought some sort of higher end products. Also thinking Chanel makeup has been generally pretty terrible. The stuff that I've tried and I've purchased. It's more about like having that designer label. Now that said, I did draw a Chanel blush for my makeup roulette, which I've been using daily, and I really like that a lot. But I feel like that's one of those things where it's like label heavy, and I've purchased some of those things before, wanting just that sort of classic designer name and being really let down by the product. Question 8 is, some would say drugstore and mid-range prices are starting to overlap. What drugstore beauty brands are guilty of making this happen, and what are your thoughts on rising drugstore makeup prices? So I feel like this is especially true in Canada. I can't speak for what it's like in other places, but in Canada, drugstore products in general tend to be very expensive. And then there are some products that continue to increase in prices. Physicians Formula is really bad for this when it comes to the drugstore. I think Pixie Beauty is pretty bad for this. These are brands that if they were sold exclusively at a place like Ulta, even the Shoppers Beauty Boutique. So in Canada, there's a few different drugstores and places you can purchase sort of makeup from. So like you have your Walmart, which is pretty typical for most places, at least North America, and then you have we have drugstores. So we have like Lawton's drugstore, we have Shoppers, and Shoppers has a beauty boutique section in most of their stores now, and they sell a lot of higher end products. So you could walk into you walk into a Chanel, but some of them do actually sell Chanel. Thinking about one of the big Shoppers near me, you walk in and there's Chanel and Dior and Urban Decay and like high-end stuff, and then they have stuff sort of moved outside of that particular beauty boutique area, which has your Maybelline CoverGirl, Physicians Formula, and other products like Pixie. And I feel like then you see these weird combination of prices, and if they were moved into the other section, it'd make more sense, but aesthetically they're not at the same level, even though price-wise, like Physicians Formula is basically the same price as Clinique. It just doesn't make sense to me that they are separated. But that's the first candidate that comes to mind. I think I've noticed NYX's prices have increased a little bit, and L'Oreal's prices, especially for foundation, has increased because they're like $20 plus for a L'Oreal foundation. Although I haven't explored the drugstore too much, but those are the things that I've noticed, and I don't like the increase in prices in general, and a lot of products have just increased, and sometimes you don't notice it. And of course prices of everything are going to increase, but I feel like it's not matching. Like my salary is not increasing, I'm not getting that cost of living increase. And then when you see a product go up by like $3 or $4, that's quite a significant increase. I noticed that with a face primer recently that went up like $5. That's pretty significant when it goes from $46 to $51. That is a big jump, and I've noticed that steady climb with drugstore prices, and it's making things so much less affordable and accessible. Unfortunately, there are some lower end brands that are sort of staying somewhat steady and reasonable in their prices, but it definitely is disheartening. Like sometimes I felt like, okay, you know what? I can't afford my really expensive foundation. I'm going to go to the drugstore and I'm going to pick something up cheap, which I'm used to cheap drugstore foundations being, less than $15, and then seeing the 20 plus tag if they're not on sale. I don't like that at all, and it's something's got to give for sure, because these brands just want more and more profit, and they are already making such an obscene amount of money. If you are ever interested, look at some of these parent brands. Do a Google search for their earnings, revenue. Just type in a few different keywords like that and PDF, and a lot of times you'll find their press releases when they release sort of like their quarterly revenue, and you can read through their reports because it's all just public. You just kind of might have to do a little digging for it, and it's insane how much money these brands actually make, and they don't need to be making such obscene profits while people are struggling to make ends meet. And then they're still pushing the message on us that we need more, that we have to have all this stuff, that we need these beauty products in order to exist as a woman. Ridiculous. Anyway, question 9 is, with anti-consumerism and an eat the rich mentality starting to take hold in the YouTube beauty space, are there any brands you still feel a loyalty towards? If so, why? It's funny because, complaining about the prices of things, and I'm always drawn to the more expensive brands, and I don't have anything against that as a whole. I'm not taking down designers. I'm not taking down luxury brands. I'm not being like these things shouldn't exist. I understand how those things work. I understand the difference with specific quality, with ingredients, with the branding, with people behind it, with the time it takes to produce certain things. I understand that. And what's changing for me now is understanding what I can afford, what's realistic for me, and then still appreciating aesthetic, which is why like I do feel some loyalty to Natasha Denona, even if I probably will never be able to afford the products again, because aesthetically, and I understand why the products are priced the way that they are priced. So that stuff makes sense to me, and I will admit I get suckered into the way I get treated online and social media when brands interact with me in my posts and my content. It does make me a little biased. It does make me appreciate them more. I have constantly tagged some of my favorite brands like MAC and Urban Decay, and I don't think they've ever liked a single one of my posts, for example, right? Like they've never interacted with me, and not that I'm saying I'm entitled to it, but it does make a difference. Like every time I tag Natasha Denona in an eyeshadow post on Instagram, she likes it. Pat McGrath has liked my eyeshadow posts. You know, I've had conversations with Lisa Eldridge when I used her lipstick, and that sort of connection, even if it's just a like, you know, like Becca is pretty good with interacting. When I was a really big Tarte fangirl, maybe Tarte's a brand that I sort of left behind, or Benefit's a brand I left behind. Now I'm backtracking as I'm thinking more about it. But you know, like Becca's liked my posts a lot and interacted with me, and those sort of little engagement things make a difference for me in terms of brand loyalty. And those are the brands that I keep going back to. And then there are the other brands that I have loyalty towards because it's so ingrained, you know, like CoverGirl is so ingrained because I remember all the ads when I was younger. I remember my best friend, we were pretending we were CoverGirls all the time. Like that was the whole thing. We'd do the easy breezy, beautiful CoverGirl, or maybe she's born with it, maybe it's Maybelline. Like we were always pretending we were in makeup ads, and we were like very into it. This would have been like late 90s, right? So it was a very big thing, and so I still have that ingrained loyalty for brands like that, and that's why those are the brands that I generally keep going back to. Question 10 is, have you ever felt betrayed by a brand? If so, what happened? I think Kat Von D. Kat Von D was one of my absolute favorite brands, product-wise, aesthetically, and God, what a train wreck that ended up being, and just really disheartening. I don't know what it is about some of those like sort of quirky alternative brand, quirky is such a terrible word, but like alternative brands, and then usually like the people behind them just suck so bad, and it's horrible, and it does feel like a personal betrayal sometimes. It's like, man, I was rooting for you. We were out rooting for you. You were my favorite, or one of my favorites, and yeah, that was hard. And I think Tarte too, when they did the whole Shape Tape thing, that terrible foundation launch, and I mean, at least the silver lining is the conversations that generated from that, and people became more aware of what was common practice in the beauty industry, and people are more willing to call brands out. But yeah, Tarte was one of my favorites as well, and when they did that, it was like, God damn it. Like, I couldn't believe that they did it, but also I wasn't surprised. So that was also sort of eye-opening to me, and made me step back and look at sort of the brands that I really do support quite vocally. Question 11 is, are there any brands that you feel give off exclusivity vibes, making you feel like you aren't cool or pretty enough to buy from? If so, which brand and why? Glossier, Tom Ford, Charlotte Tilbury are the first brands that come to mind. Glossier, so I have purchased from Glossier, and I'm getting over sort of my initial hatred of Glossier, just the way that it was sort of marketed, and I feel like even Glossier themselves is kind of coming around from the whole stereotypical model off duty thing, where they still are pushing that, but I feel like there has been sort of a rebellion of people being like, you don't have to be just conventionally attractive to use their products. You can have a Glossier aesthetic without having to have perfect everything already and basically need no makeup. So I've kind of come around a little bit, but Tom Ford feels very expensive and designer and luxury in a very unapproachable way for me, and I can't relate to the aesthetic, and it feels like it's for a certain type of person. And Charlotte Tilbury as well, just that same sort of high-end luxury feel. Feels very celebrity focused, feels very, I don't know how to describe it really, but I've also read some interviews with Charlotte Tilbury and watched some of her stuff, and it just feels like I want it in a little bit like the whole like kind of quasi rock and roll feel. Like I feel like some Charlotte Tilbury looks are very much like beautiful model wearing like the smoky eyeliner, like she was hanging out backstage at a rock show, sort of like modern day Penny Lane from Almost Famous, and I just like I'm not cool enough for that. I wish, like that's like ideal dream aesthetic, but you know I'm not cool enough for that. Those are the three that come to mind. Question 12, what's worse, choice fatigue, exhaustion from too many makeup releases, or a lackluster quarterly launch for a brand you're typically excited about? Well, as someone on a no-buy, I would rather have the lackluster quarterly launch. Having choice fatigue, yeah, too many releases, that's worse. I feel like maybe brands aren't so heavy with the releases these days, but also I've been really absent from looking at new releases and looking what's coming out and just generally avoiding it. I'm not hip with what's happening anymore. I don't know what all the new releases are unless I happen to stumble across it from watching a random YouTube video, or if it comes across like my Twitter feed. That's usually where I come across some of the new releases the most. But I think that there definitely has been a few years where it's been way too much all at one time. Like I really wish stuff was spread out more. It can be frustrating when you're like really into a brand and you're really looking forward to what they're coming out with, and then it's like boring. But then at least like you save your money. You don't have the FOMO for missing out on it, and you can just move on. Save your money for the next release, right? Like wait, they will eventually come up with something that will interest you, or you will move on from that brand and you will find another brand that will interest you. Question 13 is, have brand trips or sponsored videos ever made you actually interested in a product / beauty launch the brand was promoting? Never a brand trip. Never. Occasionally a sponsored video has made me interested in products, made me curious about them and want to do some like digging and exploring. I like when the sponsored videos feel natural and when it feels organic and like the person is actually believing what they're saying. And I definitely feel like I have been misled. I think probably the biggest example that comes to mind is Samantha Ravindal in Nude Sticks. I really fell hard for her pushing Nude Sticks, and then she stopped mentioning Nude Sticks when she was no longer sponsored by them. So I was just like, okay. There's a few people I've watched that have been sort of like that. They've done their sponsored video or videos, and then they don't really talk about the products anymore. So yeah, there's been times when it has worked for me, and there's times when I wish it had not. And I just, you know, I want to go back and watch some of the other videos and genuinely see if they are interested in something and see how often it comes up, because there have been really good sponsorships. I think Mariah Leonard has done some with NARS that have been really good, and she's kind of sold me on NARS products in the past when she did some sponsored NARS stuff. So like there's stuff that it does work, and then there's stuff that it works but you wish it hadn't worked, if that says enough. Question 14, are there any indie brands you hope to see sold at Ulta or Sephora in the future? Definitely. There are quite a few actually. Cleona Cosmetics, I would love. Like Sydney Grace, Colored Rain. I'd really like to see some of these smaller indie brands that are like sort of eyeshadow focused, especially ones that have unique single shadows, become more easily available and easily accessible. And even if they're just sold online only, if they are sold somewhere that it's more accessible and easier to get my hands on it for the more affordable price, then that would be really beneficial for, you know, sometime in the future if I was ever needing more eyeshadow. But I'm also not very familiar with indie brands either, because there's something that I just don't get to purchase a lot from because I can't afford it, and a lot of indie brands tend to be very inaccessible if you are not in the US. And the last question is, if you could give any beauty brand a rebranding, which brand would it be and what elements of the brand would you modify? So in the creator's video, Tara, she talked about Urban Decay for a second, and then she was like, you know, I feel like most people are going to talk about Urban Decay. And I was like, damn it, that's exactly what I was going to talk about, Urban Decay. But then I was like, well, she has a good point. I don't think Urban Decay is ever going to go back to their you know, their original sort of grungy roots. They're not going to go back there. They've made too much money with their naked stuff. They're not getting dirty again. So aesthetically, I'd probably change a brand like Pixie and polish the packaging a little bit so that it could be sold at a more higher end place and kind of move it out of the drugstore, because I do think the products are generally pretty great, but I think the packaging is lacking. That is one that I would definitely want to switch up a little bit. And then I don't know what's happening with the KVD vegan beauty nonsense, but I really wish they would do a whole rebranding and switch everything up, but keep some of the general aesthetic. I really want to see a brand adopt the lime crime aesthetic. That's not lime crime. And I feel like that's what Kat Von D was sort of like before, at least kind of close. And I really would like to see the KVD line embrace that aesthetic fully. I think that'd be amazing. Or just like some new brand come over and take that over. Tarte, of course, could use a rebranding. Not that I really think it would matter because they've got too much going on there. Again, I'm kind of out of the loop with brands and I haven't purchased anything new, and I'm not really familiar with what a lot of things are and a lot of changes, because I did notice some changes to some brands. Like I probably would have said CoverGirl, but I noticed that they've changed a lot recently as well. So a lot of non-answers here coming from somebody who's on their second no-buy year. It's a different experience answering some of these beauty questions. But anyway, I hope this was at least somewhat interesting. Let me know if you have any responses to any of these questions. I'd love to hear from you. If you want to chat about anything in the comments, I'm more than happy to do so. It's always fun getting to talk with people. I really enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I hope we get a chance to chat soon. And let me know if you want to see me do any other tag videos, because I was not tagged to do this one. I just decided to do it. So if there's anything tag wise that you'd like to see me do, please let me know down below. All right, thank you so much once again, and I hope we get a chance to chat soon. Bye for now.